Hi, this is your instructor, Monty Van Wart. Today, we are very fortunate to have Brianna Baeza, who is the NeoGov Human Resources Coordinator for CSUSB. Today, she's going to be talking to us about some selection issues and providing us with some examples. And our first question is, what steps does HR here at CSUSB use in order to ensure that hiring by departments is merit-based? And before you do that, Brianna, would you also introduce yourself and then talk about the steps that we use in order to make sure that we have merit-based hiring?
Hi, I'm Brianna. I graduated from UC Riverside with my bachelor's degree in English and Film and Visual Culture, and I am currently in the process of obtaining my MBA in marketing. We actually use the NeoGov system on campus as our recruiting system. And this system has really allowed us to change the way that we recruit. We are now able to use supplemental questions to really guide our rating process and ensure that we are allowing all candidates qualified consideration for any of the positions that we do have going on right now. One of the ways that we do use supplemental questions is by giving specific rating to those questions that are specific requirements of the position. And this is usually including education and experience questions. One of the ways we do that is actually for an administrative support assistant one position. They are not required to have a bachelor's degree, but we can ask multiple questions so that we can make sure that any of the hiring committees that are looking at applications can see the specific requirements and qualifications that each applicant does have. So we would ask specific questions including, do you possess a high school diploma, or do you possess the equivalent to a bachelor's degree or a four-year degree? We would then assign a rating to the high school diploma question, since that is a requirement of the position, and then allow them to answer the question regarding the bachelor's degree, but not assign a rating to it. We would do the same thing with an experience question. So if it was required that they had 1 year of experience for that position, we would assign a rating to that question, and if the committee was interested in someone that did have more experience than that, we could then ask another question regarding the additional experience.
I think you mentioned supplemental questions. Could you elaborate just a little
Yes.
bit with regard to supplemental questions?
So supplemental questions are the questions that are asked at the end of the application. So they're not questions that are asked on every application that's submitted, and they can change regarding the specific position. So they are questions that we tailor to the position itself. They could range from an education experience or a specific question that the hiring committee is just interested in finding out. This could be anything along the lines of additional languages that someone speaks, any experience that may seem out of the ordinary for maybe an administrative support assistant, but would be essential for that administrative support assistant working in the police department. So we do have questions that are completely different from position to position, and it really would just be those supplemental questions that were used.
Let me do one more follow-up, Brianna. So really, we can almost say there are like 3 different classes of ways that we would get information. Your basic information for staff, for entry-level staff, would be the one structure. The second, though, when you have more advanced positions or you want to customize it, then you have your supplemental questions. And then for supervisors and managers and very specialized and professional positions, then you may have a more detailed, potentially, way of structuring the process, correct?
Yes. So we do have multiple different types of applications that we use in the system, and they are all set to maybe a default application that we can use for all positions across the board, but an MPP application would be established as well, which is a management personnel plan application. And this really just allows us to make sure that we are asking the appropriate questions and assigning the application specifically for that type of position. So an entry-level position doesn't have the same qualifications needed as a management position does.
What you're really saying is all positions have a default.
Yes.
However, the degree of customization becomes greater in general as you move up to more senior positions.
Exactly.
Very good. That's very useful. So, Brianna, let me ask our next question rather, and that is, interviewing is a particularly important part of the whole selection process. Can you discuss with us a little bit about how the HR department here at CSUSB helps support the interview process and make sure that it is done appropriately?
So once the application process has been established and the hiring committee has selected candidates, we ask that the hiring committee submit an email to our receptionist, who actually then will move forward in scheduling interviews. This email will usually include all of the candidates that they have considered for interviews, the interview questions that they will be asking during the interviews, and the schedule that they would like to assign. So the receptionist would then move forward in scheduling all of those interviews, in contacting each of the candidates individually, and creating an interview packet, which would then be given to the hiring committee a day before interviews are conducted. This packet would include the interview schedule, the assessment sheets, the interview questions, and the applications for all of the candidates who were invited to interview.
Excellent. And then the final question is, can you give us 2 or 3 tips from your experience about how we can do selection the best possible?
So because we are creating specific positions or postings for positions, we would entice the hiring committees to actually consider the supplemental questions as a tool to use as part of their process. We can tailor each of the supplemental questions to the specific department needs, and so giving us insight into what they are requiring or what they need in that department would allow us to further assist in that process.
So that's the customization
Exactly.
process. Okay, that's good. So that's one tip. Make sure that you know how to customize it before you start the process rather than after you get into the process. What else?
Aside from that, we would ask that the committee does create the interview questions so that once we do get into the interview step, we can have those questions ready to go and have them reviewed by one of our managers. We do have to review each of the interview questions to make sure that they do meet campus policy and that they are helpful to the interview process itself.
Excellent. Well, Brianna, I want to thank you very much on behalf of our virtual class. This is very useful to get a concrete example. Thank you, and we're really enjoying going from person to person and office to office, getting these live examples. Thank you very much, Brianna.